The grand chamber of the Galactic Assembly hung suspended in the void, a massive crystalline structure that refracted starlight in geometric patterns across its chambers. Inside, representatives from 27 sentient species gathered in tiered seating around a central platform where a single human stood, wrists bound in luminescent restraints. Elias Wade kept his breathing steady, his posture straight but not rigid. 6 years as Earth's diplomatic envoy to the outer reaches had taught him how to stand before alien scrutiny without betraying emotion. The glowing cuffs around his wrists were mostly ceremonial, an insulting reminder of humanity's position in the galactic hierarchy. "Elias Wade of Earth," announced the chamber's acoustic system, translating simultaneously into all native languages. "You stand accused of disrupting critical trade negotiations between the alien consortium and the mining guilds of Proxima Centauri, resulting in substantial economic damage." From the highest tier of the chamber, Lady Vexara of Alis rose from her ornate seat. Her scaled skin shimmered with iridescent purple-black patterns, and the ceremonial crest on her head expanded slightly, a sign of attention among her kind. Her 6-fingered hands gripped the railing as her vertical pupils fixed on Elias. "I move to dispense with formalities." Vexara's voice resonated with the natural, harmonic quality of aliens. "This human deliberately sabotaged negotiations that would have brought prosperity to 17 systems." Elias maintained eye contact with her, a gesture considered challenging among aliens. "The record will show I merely presented evidence of labor violations on Proxima mining colonies. If transparency disrupts your profit margins, perhaps the issue lies with your business practices, not my actions." A low murmur rippled through the assembly. Vexara's crest flared fully now, her equivalent of a flush of anger. "You forget your place, Earthborn," she hissed, the translator barely keeping pace with her rapid speech. "Your species hasn't even achieved unified planetary governance, yet you presume to lecture beings who mastered interstellar travel while your ancestors were discovering fire." Ambassador Thulox of the Vega Confederation, a being of gelatinous composition housed in an environmental suit, raised a mechanical appendage. "I remind the Assembly that all representatives, regardless of species origin, have equal standing to present evidence under Article 7. Vexara's aide, a nervous alien male named Drovex, whispered urgently in her ear. She dismissed him with a sharp gesture. "Evidence? Very well." Vexara activated the chamber's holographic system with a flick of her wrist. "The human Wade has consistently undermined alien interests across 3 sectors. We have records of his meetings with known dissidents." Elias smiled thinly. "I meet with many individuals in my diplomatic capacity. The Galactic Compact ensures free association rights for all sentient beings." "Your diplomatic immunity does not extend to inciting rebellion." Vexara's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. Elias stepped forward, causing the guards flanking the platform to tense. "Interesting that you consider workers demanding safe conditions rebellion, Lady Vexara." Something flickered in Vexara's eyes, not just anger, but something closer to fear. Elias had seen that look before, the moment when a powerful being realizes their opponent might know more than anticipated. "You overstep, human," she said, voice lower now. "Your kind has been permitted into galactic society out of courtesy, not right." "Permitted?" Elias raised an eyebrow. "Humanity fought a 3-year war against Centaurian expansion before the Assembly acknowledged our sovereignty. Nothing was permitted. We earned our place." The chamber grew silent. Mentioning the Earth-Centauri War was considered tactless in diplomatic settings, a reminder of how a supposedly primitive species had repelled one of the Assembly's oldest members. From his seat among the Terran delegation, Admiral Jansen, Earth's military attaché, shifted uncomfortably. He and Elias had discussed strategy before this hearing. Confrontation wasn't part of the plan. Vexara descended from her platform, breaking protocol. Her ornate robes trailed behind her as she approached the central floor, stopping just meters from Elias. Even in the Assembly's artificial gravity, she moved with predatory grace. "I have watched your species for decades," she said quietly, though the chamber acoustics carried her words to every ear. "You mistake tolerance for acceptance, human. Do not confuse your temporary usefulness with belonging." Elias met her gaze without flinching. Something passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of worthy adversaries sizing each other up. The proceedings will continue tomorrow, announced the Assembly AI. The accused will remain in diplomatic custody. As the representatives filed out, Vexara lingered, studying Elias with unsettling intensity. "You're hiding something, Wade," she whispered, "and I will find it." Elias allowed himself the smallest of smiles. "We all have secrets, Lady Vexara. Some are more dangerous than others." For just a moment, something flashed in her alien eyes, a spark of intrigue that transcended species boundaries. Then she turned and swept away, leaving Elias to wonder if he'd imagined the momentary connection beneath their mutual hostility. Day 2 of the proceedings brought a palpable tension to the Grand Chamber. Representatives spoke in hushed tones as they filed into their positions, all eyes tracking Lady Vexara as she ascended to her elevated platform. She wore battle regalia today, a clear departure from diplomatic attire, with ceremonial blades sheathed at her waist and ancestral patterns painted across her scaled skin. Elias Wade entered under guard, though he'd been permitted to exchange the restraints for a simple tracking bracelet. Unlike yesterday, he carried a small data crystal, officially approved by the Assembly's judicial AI. "The proceedings will continue," announced the chamber system. "The accused may present his defense." Elias moved to the central platform with measured strides. "Distinguished representatives, I stand accused of disrupting trade negotiations. But was it disruption or illumination?" He inserted the data crystal into the podium interface. "With the Assembly's permission, I present Exhibit A." The chamber's holographic system activated, displaying shipping manifests, transaction records, and encoded communications. The records appeared to originate from alien diplomatic vessels. "These are private consortium records," Vexara exclaimed, rising from her seat. "How did you—" "These records," Elias continued calmly, "show Lady Vexara's personal vessels transporting weapons to the Proxima mining colonies, weapons later used against worker uprisings. The same workers whose rights I supposedly interfered with by revealing their conditions." A ripple of murmurs spread across the chamber. Ambassador Thulox extended 2 sensor appendages toward the data. "These appear authentic," the vegan representative observed. "And if authentic, they constitute a violation of non-interference statutes regarding labor disputes." Vexara's crest expanded fully, pulsating with dark colors. "This is fabricated. The human has doctored these records." "The records bear consortium verification seals," Elias replied. "But perhaps more interesting is Exhibit B." With a gesture, he brought up a new set of documents. "Financial transfers from Mining Guild accounts to your personal coffers, Lady Vexara, precisely timed after each shipment." The chamber erupted in voices. Vexara's aide Drovex shrank back from her side as her body language shifted to what alien cultural experts would recognize as dangerous aggression. "Enough," Vexara's voice cut through the noise. She descended from her platform with predatory grace, her ceremonial blades clinking against her ornate armor. The guards tensed but made no move to stop her. An alien noblewoman outranked them in the complex hierarchy of the Assembly. She circled Elias, her vertical pupils narrowed to slits. "You think yourself clever, Earthborn, bringing stolen data before this court." "Not stolen," Elias corrected. "Provided by concerned parties within your own consortium. It seems not all aliens share your contempt for ethical governance." Vexara's laugh was cold and crystalline. "You speak of ethics while your planet remains divided, your oceans dying, your governments corrupted by corporate influence. The arrogance is breathtaking." She moved closer, her face inches from his. Those in the front rows could see her scales darkening, a physiological sign of intense emotion. "I have overseen the development of 17 systems," she hissed. "Built trade networks that feed billions. What has humanity contributed to the galaxy but violence and disorder?" Elias remained perfectly still. "Justice, perhaps." Something snapped in Vexara. With a fluid motion that seemed almost choreographed, she struck, not with her blades but with open contempt. She spat directly into Elias' face, a supreme insult in nearly every known culture. "Justice," she snarled loud enough for the entire chamber to hear. "From animals who barely understand space travel." She turned to address the Assembly, playing to the gallery. "See how your human diplomat stands there, degraded. This is humanity, pretending at civilization, pretending at dignity." The chamber had gone deathly quiet. Several representatives looked away, embarrassed by the display. Others watched with cruel amusement. Elias slowly wiped his face with the back of his hand. His expression hadn't changed, but something shifted in his eyes, a coldness, a focus that hadn't been there before. "Lady Vexara," he said softly, "in human culture we have a saying, measure twice, cut once. It means one should be certain before taking irreversible action." "More human wisdom," she mocked, turning back to him. "And what irreversible action have I taken, spitting on an inferior being?" "You've made an error in judgment," Elias said. What happened next occurred so quickly that many representatives would later disagree about the sequence of events. Elias moved, a blur of precise motion. One moment Vexara stood proudly before him. The next, she was on her knees, both ceremonial blades somehow in Elias' hands, crossed at her throat. Her own ceremonial sash had been used to bind her hands behind her back, and another piece of fabric silenced her startled cry. The assembly guards raised their weapons, but froze in confusion. None had seen exactly how the situation had reversed. Admiral Jansen from the Terran delegation sighed audibly. "Damn it, Wade," he muttered. "So much for diplomatic solutions." Elias looked calmly at the stunned representatives, still holding the blades with expert precision. "Before serving as a diplomat, I spent 15 years in Earth's Shadow Corps. I was hoping that wouldn't become relevant to these proceedings, but Lady Vexara has made her position clear." He addressed the chamber directly now. "Humanity doesn't pretend at dignity, we insist upon it. We don't pretend at justice, we demand it." He lowered the blades slightly. "Even for those who despise us." The assembly erupted in chaos, but beneath the shouting and demands, a new understanding had dawned. Humanity was not merely tolerated in galactic society. It was feared. "Stand down, Wade." Admiral Jansen's voice carried the weight of command as he rose from the Terran delegation section. "That's an order." Elias held his position for 3 more heartbeats, the alien blade still at Vexara's throat. Her eyes burned with rage and something else, shock perhaps, or the first flickers of respect. With deliberate care, he withdrew the weapons and stepped back, though he kept them in hand. "My apologies to the assembly for the disruption," he said with perfect composure, as if he hadn't just subdued one of the most powerful figures in the galaxy. Security forces rushed forward, confusion evident in their movements. No protocol existed for this unprecedented situation. Some moved to protect Vexara, others to apprehend Elias. The chamber's AI attempted to restore order, its neutral voice nearly drowned by the chaos. "Silence!" The command came from Representative Kalath of the Elder Worlds, a massive, crystalline being who rarely spoke in proceedings. The chamber immediately quieted. In 2 centuries of assembly participation, the Elder had invoked speaking privileges less than a dozen times. "What we have witnessed," Kalath's voice resonated through the chamber, "is the consequence of mutual disrespect, a violation of assembly protocols by both parties." Elias gently removed the gag from Vexara's mouth, then released her bindings with a single smooth motion. She rose to her feet with as much dignity as she could muster, her scales flickering with complex patterns. "This human attacked a high representative," she hissed, though her usual confidence had faltered. "After you assaulted him," countered Ambassador Thulox. "The recordings are quite clear, Lady Vexara." Admiral Jansen stepped onto the chamber floor, approaching with military precision. "The Terran delegation formally apologizes for Diplomat Wade's excessive demonstration." He fixed Elias with a stern look. "Though we maintain that the physical confrontation was initiated by the alien representative." Elias handed the ceremonial blades to Jansen, handle first. "The evidence I presented remains valid," he said calmly. "Lady Vexara's financial connections to illegal arms trading should be the focus of this assembly, not our personal disagreement." Representative Kalath's crystalline form glittered as they moved toward the center of the chamber. "The human speaks truth. The evidence will be examined by an independent tribunal." Their faceted eyes rotated toward Vexara. "Lady Vexara will remain in protective custody until this matter is resolved." "Protective custody?" Vexara's crest flattened in outrage. "I am alien nobility, you cannot." "For your own safety," Kalath interrupted. "There are elements within the consortium who may view you as compromised after today's revelations." Understanding dawned in Vexara's expression. If her illegal dealings were exposed, she would have enemies beyond the assembly. The consortium dealt harshly with those who brought embarrassment to their collective interests. Security officers escorted Vexara from the chamber. As she passed Elias, she paused momentarily. "How?" she whispered, low enough that only he could hear. "How did you move so quickly?" "Most beings telegraph their intentions," Elias replied softly. "You've spent too long among those who fear you to notice your own patterns." Something flashed in her alien eyes, not hatred but curiosity. Then she was gone, surrounded by a phalanx of guards. Admiral Jansen gripped Elias' arm firmly. "The Shadow Corps was supposed to be redacted from your public record, Wade," he muttered. 15 years of diplomatic work potentially undone in 30 seconds. "Perhaps," Elias conceded as they walked from the chamber. "Or perhaps the galaxy needed a reminder." Outside the chamber, in a secured observation room, they found themselves alone. "You could have killed her," Jansen observed, his tone neutral. "That was never the objective." "Then what was?" Elias watched through the one-way transparency as the chamber continued its proceedings, representatives clustering in urgent discussion. "To change the equation. Humanity has been playing by their rules too long, accepting second-class status." Jansen sighed. "High Command isn't going to be pleased. We had a strategy, slow integration, demonstrating value. While our colonies suffer restrictions and our ships are routinely searched," Elias shook his head. "Respect isn't granted through patience, Admiral. Sometimes it must be taken." The door slid open, revealing Ambassador Thulox. The vegan's environmental suit hummed softly as they entered. "An interesting session," Thulox's translated voice had a note of amusement. "I've been instructed to inform you that you are both under, how would humans say it, house arrest, until the Judicial Committee reaches a decision." "Expected," Jansen nodded. "What you may not expect," Thulox continued, their gelatinous form shifting colors within the suit, "is that 7 delegations have already requested private discussions with Earth's representatives. It seems your demonstration has altered certain perceptions." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Which delegations?" "The Rigelian Compact, the Procyon Alliance, and 5 others who prefer anonymity for now." Thulox's form rippled in what humans who knew vegans would recognize as their equivalent of a smile. "It seems your display of human capabilities has sparked interest. Many have long suspected the alien consortium of corruption, but few dared challenge them directly." After Thulox departed, Jansen gave Elias a measured look. "Was this your plan all along, to provoke her into a public misstep?" Elias gazed through the observation window at the assembly chamber. Representatives from across the galaxy were engaged in urgent discussions, casting occasional glances toward the Terran section. "Let's say I calculated the probabilities," he replied. "Either way, the galaxy now knows humanity isn't merely seeking a place at the table." "And what are we seeking in your view?" Jansen asked. Elias turned from the window. "A future where we're equal partners, not tolerated guests, and sometimes—" He flexed his hand, recalling the precise movements that had disarmed Vexara. "Equality must be demonstrated, not requested." In her secure quarters, Vexara replayed the chamber's recording for the 12th time. She watched frame by frame as the human moved with impossible speed, his expression never changing as he systematically dismantled her defenses. Her hand unconsciously touched her throat where the blades had crossed. He could have killed her. Instead, he had given her a message, one that her pride was only now allowing her to hear. The detention complex orbiting the assembly station was designed with multiple species in mind. Separate atmospheric controls, gravity adjustments, and security systems calibrated to diverse physiologies. Elias' quarters were comfortable enough, though the subtle increase in gravity suggested the system had been programmed for Centaurian preferences. 3 days had passed since the confrontation in the chamber. 3 days of debriefings, formal statements, and diplomatic maneuvering as Earth's representatives worked to leverage the incident to humanity's advantage. Elias stood at the viewport, watching the slow rotation of stars. A subtle vibration in the floor alerted him moments before the security alarm triggered. Red emergency lighting bathed the room as the station's AI announced a containment breach in a calm, multi-harmonic voice. His door slid open unexpectedly. Instead of security personnel, Admiral Jansen stood in the corridor, expression grim. "We have a situation," Jansen said tersely. "Someone's attempting to access the detention level. Not through the main systems, they're using old maintenance tunnels." "Assembly security." "Compromised," Jansen replied. "Kalath suspects its consortium enforcers if Vexara has evidence that could implicate others." Elias was already moving, retrieving the hidden implements he'd managed to retain despite thorough security scans. "They'll eliminate her before she can testify." "That's the assessment," Jansen confirmed. "The problem is if she's killed in assembly custody." "Earth gets blamed," Elias finished. "Perfect way to discredit our evidence and our standing." He moved toward the door. "Where is she being held?" "Section 7 Delta, but Wade," Jansen blocked his path. "You're not authorized to intervene. This is an assembly security matter." "With all respect, Admiral, if I wait for authorization, we'll be explaining to Earth Command why interstellar relations collapsed because we stood by during an assassination." He stepped around Jansen. "Better to ask forgiveness than permission." Jansen's expression hardened, then relaxed into reluctant agreement. "Go. I'll coordinate with Thulox to ensure friendly forces don't mistake you for the threat." The detention complex's emergency protocols had sealed most corridors, but Elia's Shadow Corps training included comprehensive knowledge of standardized station designs. He navigated through maintenance ducts and emergency access routes, moving with practiced silence. As he approached Section 7 Delta, the acrid smell of plasma discharge filled the air. Someone had already breached the outer security perimeter. He quickened his pace, keeping to the shadows. Two figures in unmarked environmental suits lay crumpled outside Vexara's quarters, their weapons still holstered. Clean neck strikes, professional work. A third attacker was working on the door seal with a molecular cutter. Elias closed the distance in seconds. The attacker sensed movement too late, turning just as Elias' strike connected with the neural cluster at the base of their skull, a killing blow specifically calibrated for alien physiology. The door to Vexara's quarters slid open, revealing the alien noblewoman in a defensive stance, a makeshift weapon fashioned from a broken furniture component in her hands. Her eyes widened at the sight of Elias standing over her would-be assassin. "You," she hissed, not lowering her improvised weapon. "We don't have time," Elias responded, checking the corridor. "3 down, but there will be more. The consortium doesn't send incomplete teams." Vexara's crest flattened in suspicion. "Why would you help me, human, after our encounter?" "Your death serves neither Earth's interests nor justice," he replied, retrieving the fallen attacker's weapon and offering it to her. "And contrary to your belief, humans don't seek revenge, we seek resolution." She hesitated, then took the weapon, checking its charge with practiced ease. "Resolution," she repeated. "An interesting concept from someone who held blades to my throat." "A demonstration, not an intent to harm." He gestured toward the emergency exit. "We need to move to a secure location. The primary system is compromised." As they navigated the labyrinthine back corridors of the station, Vexara maintained a wary distance. "The consortium has significant resources within assembly security," she observed. "How did you anticipate this attack?" "I didn't," Elias admitted. "But I've spent enough time in galactic politics to recognize when someone becomes a liability to powerful interests." They reached a maintenance hub, temporarily secure from both attackers and monitoring systems. Elias established communication with Admiral Jansen using a secure frequency. "You're both alive. Good," Jansen's voice came through with minimal distortion. "Representative Kalath has deployed their personal security detail to secure the station core. We've identified at least 7 infiltrators, all with consortium signatures." "We need extraction," Elias responded, "preferably to neutral territory." "Working on it," Jansen replied. "Maintain position if possible, out." Elias turned to find Vexara studying him with unnerving intensity. "Your intelligence services knew about my weapons deals," she said finally. "That's why Earth sent a Shadow Corps operative disguised as a diplomat." "Former operative," Elias corrected. "And no, I was genuinely assigned as a diplomat. My previous training was simply relevant when diplomacy failed." "Then why did you really help me just now?" Her vertical pupils contracted to thin lines. You could have allowed the assassination and simplified matters for Earth considerably. Elias considered his answer carefully. Because summary execution isn't justice, even for enemies. Because you deserve a trial for your actions, not elimination for becoming inconvenient to your superiors. He paused. And because I suspect there's more to this corruption than one alien's ambition. Vexara's scales shifted patterns, a subtle alien expression that didn't translate easily to human understanding. You're either naively principled or cleverly calculating, Wade. I haven't decided which. Perhaps both, he acknowledged. A silence fell between them, neither comfortable nor entirely hostile. Vexara moved to the small viewport, gazing at the stars with what might have been melancholy. I believed in the consortium's mission once, she said quietly. The promise of bringing order to chaotic systems, prosperity through structure. She turned to face him. Do you know what it's like to realize the cause you've served is corrupt at its core? Yes, Elias replied simply. Their eyes met, a moment of unexpected recognition passing between them. Two beings from vastly different worlds, both disillusioned by the institutions they'd once served faithfully. The evidence you presented, Vexara said after a moment, it was incomplete. I suspected as much. She approached him, close enough that he could see the intricate patterns beneath her scales. If I survived to testify, I could provide information about operations extending far beyond my personal involvement. Weapons deported to 17 systems, forced labor camps, experiments on sentient beings. Why would you do that? Perhaps I too seek resolution, Wade. There was something almost vulnerable in her alien features now. Or perhaps I simply wish to choose the manner of my downfall. The communication system chimed. Jansen's voice returned, outlining an extraction plan. As Elias confirmed the details, he caught Vexara watching him with an expression he couldn't quite interpret, something between curiosity and dawning respect. It seems we'll be traveling together, she observed as he closed the communication. So it seems. An unlikely alliance, she added, her voice carrying a note he hadn't heard before. The most effective kind, Elias replied, finding himself strangely intrigued by this new dimension of their adversarial relationship. As they prepared to move toward the extraction point, the tension between them had transformed into something neither had anticipated. A fragile connection forged in crisis, with the potential to become something more complex than either would have believed possible days earlier. The safe house on Proxima, Centauri's fourth moon, had once been an observatory, its massive dome now repurposed as a secure meeting facility for delicate diplomatic operations. For 6 weeks, it had served as home to the unlikely pair who had become the center of a galactic political storm. Elias stood on the observation deck, watching the gas giant's swirling storms through the reinforced viewport. Behind him, holographic displays tracked ongoing assembly proceedings and security updates from a dozen systems. Admiral Jansen has arrived, announced the facility's AI. Send him up, Elias replied, not turning from the view. The door slid open moments later, admitting Jansen and, surprisingly, Ambassador Thulox. The vegan's environmental suit had been modified with additional security features, testament to the dangerous political climate. Wade, Jansen nodded in greeting. Where's our guest? Analyzing the latest data packet from her contacts within the consortium, Elias replied. She rarely sleeps. A trait you share, observed Thulox, their translator, conveying dry amusement. The Assembly Committee has reached its preliminary findings. You'll both want to hear this. As if summoned by the statement, Vexara emerged from the adjacent chamber. 6 weeks of collaboration had changed her, subtle differences in posture, in the way she carried herself. The imperious disdain had faded, replaced by something more measured, more focused. Admiral, Ambassador, she acknowledged them with a graceful nod. I presume you bring news of my imminent trial and execution. Actually, Jansen replied, the committee has ruled that your testimony against the consortium leadership constitutes mitigating circumstances. He activated a data pad, displaying the official findings. Combined with evidence that you were acting under duress from certain elements within the High Council, you're being offered limited immunity. Vexara's crest rippled in surprise. Immunity? That seems unlikely given the extent of the charges. Your information exposed a conspiracy that extended to 6 members of the Assembly, Theolox interjected, their gelatinous form shifting colors within the containment suit. The value of your cooperation outweighs the desire for punitive measures. Elias watched her process this information. Over the weeks of working together, poring over evidence, preparing testimony, narrowly escaping 2 more assassination attempts, he had learned to read her alien expressions with increasing accuracy. "And what of diplomat Wade?" Vexara asked, her eyes finding his across the room. "Has the Assembly forgiven his dramatic demonstration as well?" Jansen's expression tightened slightly. "Earth Command has authorized me to inform you that you've been officially reinstated to active diplomatic status, Wade. The Assembly considers the matter closed." "There's more," Theolox added. "The Elder Worlds have proposed a joint human-alien task force to implement reforms in the affected systems. They've specifically requested both of you to lead it." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Both of us?" "The symbolic value is considerable," Theolox's translator conveyed. "Former adversaries united in a common cause, the optics are compelling." Jansen handed Elias a secure data crystal. "Full briefing. You have 48 hours to decide." After the visitors departed, silence settled over the observatory. Elias turned back to the viewport, contemplating the implications. Vexara moved to stand beside him, close enough that he could sense the slightly elevated temperature of her alien physiology. "Will you accept?" she asked quietly. "Will you?" Her scales shifted in patterns he now recognized as thoughtful consideration. 6 weeks ago, I would have found the idea of working alongside a human absurd. "And now," he prompted when she didn't continue. "Now I find many of my previous certainties have been reconsidered." She turned to face him fully. "You risked your life to save someone who had publicly humiliated you. That is not behavior I had been taught to expect from humans." "Perhaps we've both been victims of incomplete information," Elias suggested. A soft sound escaped her, the alien equivalent of laughter, diplomatically phrased. Their eyes met, holding for longer than protocol would dictate necessary. Something had been building between them over these weeks, a connection neither had anticipated, something that transcended their differences. "In alien culture," Vexara said hesitantly, "when 2 warriors face each other in combat, they form a bond that is considered sacred, even if they begin as enemies." "We have similar traditions on Earth," Elias acknowledged. "The recognition of a worthy opponent." "More than worthy," she corrected, "equal." She raised a 6-fingered hand, hesitating before gently placing it against his chest. The gesture was intimate by alien standards, a declaration of trust, of vulnerability. "I have never considered any non-alien my equal," she admitted, "until now." Elias covered her hand with his own, feeling the alien texture of her scales against his palm. "Progress, then." "Is that what this is?" Her vertical pupils dilated slightly. "Progress." He moved closer, the distance between them narrowing both physically and metaphorically. "Or perhaps something more personal." Their first kiss was awkward, anatomical differences making the human gesture strange to her. Yet she adapted quickly, as she had to so many aspects of their forced proximity these past weeks. When they separated, her scales had flushed with bioluminescent patterns indicating heightened emotional states. "The Assembly would be scandalized," she murmured, a note of mischief in her voice. "The Assembly has survived worse shocks," he replied, tracing the patterns on her crest with gentle fingers, "including you on your knees before a human." "A position I might consider revisiting," she countered with unexpected boldness, "under very different circumstances." Later, as they lay together in the observatory's dimmed light, the gas giant's swirling storms casting moving shadows across their intertwined forms, Vexara traced the scar on his shoulder, a relic from his shadow core days. "If we accept this assignment," she said thoughtfully, "we will face opposition from both sides. Many humans still hate aliens. Many of my kind consider humans beneath notice." "And yet here we are," Elias observed, "former enemies planning a joint future." "Perhaps that is the point." She settled against him, her alien body fitting surprisingly well against his. "If we can move beyond our prejudices, it creates a template for others." 3 days later, they stood together before the reconvened assembly. The chamber had been reconfigured, The hierarchical tiers symbolically flattened to create a more circular arrangement. Representative Kalath presided, their crystalline form refracting light across the assembled delegates. The assembly recognizes diplomat Elias Wade of Earth and Lady Vexara of Alis, announced the chamber's system. They will present the framework for the joint reformation initiative. As they moved to the central platform, Elias felt Vexara's hand briefly touch his, a private gesture hidden from the watching delegates. Distinguished representatives, Elias began, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. What began in this room as confrontation has evolved into collaboration. What started with prejudice has transformed into partnership. We stand before you, Vexara continued, her harmonic voice blending with his in practiced coordination, as living proof that the differences between our species are not barriers but opportunities, not weaknesses but strengths when combined. Together, they presented their vision for a reformed set of trade relationships, labor protections, and mutual security arrangements. As they spoke, moving in tandem around the presentation space, even the most skeptical delegates could see the subtle synchronicity between them, the result of weeks spent learning each other's rhythms and perspectives. When they finished, the assembly chamber was silent for several heartbeats before erupting in a cascade of approvals that registered across the emotional and communicative spectrum of 24 species. In that moment of triumph, as the foundations of a new galactic order were laid, Elias caught Vexara's eye across the platform. Her scales shimmered with the bioluminescent pattern he now recognized as her expression of joy, a private signal meant only for him. What had begun with her spitting in his face had transformed into something neither could have imagined, a partnership that would reshape the politics of 17 systems, and a bond that defied the assumptions of 2 civilizations. Later that night, in the privacy of their shared quarters, Vexara pressed her forehead against his in the traditional alien gesture of complete trust. From bound and begging to building a future, she murmured, referencing how they had first truly seen each other. The galaxy will never be the same. Neither will we, Elias replied, drawing her closer as the stars wheeled overhead, witnesses to a union that would come to symbolize a new era in interspecies relations, and a love that had found its way across the void.